Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hello, dear students. Welcome to another lecture. Now, in this class, we are going to continue with Chapter 5 of Class 8 Alternative English Nagaland Board, which is The Summit Within, written by Major HPS Aluwal. So, as we have already read in the first part of the video, that Major HPS Ahluwalia, who was one of the members of the expedition to Mount Everest, has expressed his emotions, his feelings, and all the thoughts that came into his mind when he decided to climb Mount Everest. He talked about the importance of having endurance, persistence, and willpower. He also talks about the reason why he, in the first place, decided to climb the mountain. And then he also talks about the importance or the role played by a companion to motivate you to continue to move ahead in your climb. Let us continue reading further. Looking round from the summit, you tell yourself that it was worthwhile. Other silvery peaks appear through the clouds. If you are lucky, the sun may be on them. The surrounding peaks look like a jeweled necklace around the neck of your summit. Below, you see vast valleys sloping into the distance. It is an ennobling, enriching experience to just look down from the summit of a mountain. You bow down and make your obeisance to whichever god you worship. So he says that once you have reached the top of the mountain, once you have reached the top of the summit, you tell yourself that it was worthwhile. You tell yourself that the efforts that you made, that climbing the mountain, making the efforts, reaching the top of the mountain was actually worthwhile. Your efforts did not go into vain. There are other silvery peaks. Now, why have the peaks, the other mountain tops, been called silvery? Because of the snow which covered them. So one could see the other snow-covered peaks from there, which appeared through the clouds. And he says that if you are lucky when you reach the top of the Everest, the sun may be on them. So you may see the sun also shining on the top of those peaks. The surrounding peaks, the peaks which surround Mount Everest, they look like a jeweled necklace which is around the neck of your summit. Below, you see vast valleys sloping into the distance. So below that Everest, the apex, you see there are vast valleys that go down, sloping, they go down into the distance. And it is an ennobling, enriching experience. Ennobling, it is an amazing and enriching experience just to look down from the top of that summit. You bow down. Bow down means you bend down and you make your obeisance. Obeisance, you show your respect to whichever god you worship. I left on Everest a picture of Guru Nanak. Rawat left a picture of Goddess Durga. Dorji left a relic of Buddha. Edmund Hillary had buried a cross under a cairn in the snow. These are not symbols of conquests, but of reverence. He says that when he went on to the Everest, he left on Mount Everest a picture of Guru Nanak. One of his friends, Rawat, left a picture of Goddess Durga. Dorji left a relic, an idol of Lord Buddha. Edmund Hillary buried a cross under the cairn. Cairn means a heap of rocks and stones. He buried a cross. Now, all these symbols that they left on the summit were not the symbols of conquest. They did not want to show anybody that they had empowered, they had ruled over the mountain, but of reverence, but to show their respect. but to show their humility towards God. The experience of having climbed to the summit changes you completely. There is another summit. It is within yourself. So he says climbing the physical summit is an experience that will change you completely. But other than that, there is another summit, and this summit is within yourself. It is in your own mind. Each man carries with himself his own mountain peak. He must climb it to reach to a fuller knowledge of himself. It is fearful and unscalable. It cannot be climbed by anyone alone. You yourself have to do it. The physical act of climbing to the summit of a mountain outside is akin to the act of climbing the mountain within. The effects of both the climbs are the same. Whether the mountain you climb is physical or emotional and spiritual, the climb will certainly change you. It teaches you much about the world and about yourself. So, he says that there is a summit which exists in our mind. As I told you, this summit of our mind poses challenges in front of us, poses multiple questions in front of us, and asks us not to do something which we might feel is dangerous for us. So he says that this summit, which is there in our mind, we need to first climb this summit if you want to know yourself better. If you want to know what all you are capable of doing, you have to you have to climb this summit in your mind. The summit in one's mind is fearful and unscalable. You cannot measure how big this summit is. It cannot be climbed by anybody else. You yourself have to do it. Only you can overcome all the problems and all the questions and all the difficulties that you have in your brain. The physical act of climbing to the summit of a mountain, he says, when he was climbing the mountain physically, is akin to the act of climbing within. Akin means it is almost the same as climbing this mountain within. Unless and until here you have decided that you will take up all the challenges, no matter what, you will not be able to physically climb anything at all. The effects of both the climbs are the same. Whether the mountain that you are climbing is physical or it is emotional or spiritual in nature. No matter the kind of climb may be any of these, but it will change you. It will teach you a lot about the world and most importantly about yourself. He says that I venture to think that my experience as an Everester has provided me with the inspiration to face life's ordeals resolutely. Climbing the mountain was a worthwhile experience. The conquest of the internal summit is equally worthwhile. The internal summits are perhaps higher than most. So he says that I venture to think, I am forced to think that the experience I had by being an Everester has provided me the inspiration that whatever ordeals I may come across in life, ordeals, whatever bad, painful, difficult experiences I might come across in my life, I can overcome them resolutely. I can overcome them with determination and strength. Climbing the mountain was a worthwhile experience for him, he says. The conquest of the internal summit, the power that you exert internally on yourself by deciding here that you have to do it, is equally worthwhile because he says that the internal summits are higher than the utmost. So with this, my dear students, we come to the end of explanation of this chapter. So this chapter talks about the experiences of Major HPS Ahluwalia, who talks about how he felt in the first place when he had climbed the Everest. He talks about the feeling of humility and the feeling of being thankful to God for having achieved the biggest summits of his life. He then talked about that ever since he was a child, he always derived pleasure and happiness in the mountains. When on the plains, he used to get sad and lost. That is when he decided to climb the mountain. And then, when asked why Everest, he answered that Everest is the mightiest and the most powerful mountain range and has not allowed many people to climb on it. On the other hand, Ahluwalia sir also remarks about the point that human is always looking forward to facing obstacles in life, because the pleasure that one derives when one has overcome those obstacles is great and is very overwhelming. And it is for that pleasure that a man looks forward to achieving something, of undertaking a risk in life. He then talks about the importance and the role of a companion without whose help you would have given up midway. You would not have achieved what you had wanted. He also talks about the fact that when he went on to the Everest, he left the photo of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, then Phudorji left relic of God, Lord Buddha, Rawat left the photo of Goddess Durga, and Edmund Hillary buried a cross under the rocks and the stones there, just because they wanted to thank God for having supported them and helped them throughout. He talks about the beauty of the mountain. He talks about how small one feels when you are on the top of the mountain, and that the other peaks around you, they seem like a necklace around yourself. Then he talks about the fact that other than climbing the physical summit, it is more important to climb the mental summit that we have within each one of us. This is the summit that motivates us, that provides us the boost to move ahead and overcome whatever challenges that we might have. So, my dear students, let us move on to the discussion of the back exercises now. Standing on Everest, the writer was jubilant as well as sad. He had mixed emotions at that time. The emotion that gripped him was one of, what emotion did the writer feel through? Humility and the sense of being small. The summit of the mind refers to, what does the summit of the mind refer to? The summit of the mind refers to a lot of things. The intellectual achievements that you may achieve, the process of maturing mentally and spiritually, then the triumph of mind over the worldly pleasures, realizing that materialistic things do not matter, and most importantly, a fuller knowledge. What are the three qualities that played a major role in author's climb? Endurance, persistence, and willpower. Why is adventure, which is risky, also pleasurable? As I told you, adventure is risky, but it is pleasurable because such is the human nature. A human being derives pleasure out of overcoming the obstacle, out of the risks that it takes in life. And that is why it turns out to be pleasurable in nature. What was it about Mount Everest that the author found irresistible? So what was it about Mount Everest that the author could not resist? It was the charm, it was the beauty, moreover the fact that it was the mightiest mountain range and it had defied many previous attempts as well. One does not climb it for fame alone. One do it for beauty. So if one does not climb mountain range to be famous, why do you think one climbs it? As I said, one climbs the mountain, a mountain, or undertakes the challenge and the risks involved with climbing a mountain because of the difficulties connected with it. Because of the fact that every challenge that one takes, every obstacle that one crosses makes one more powerful and strong. So that is the reason that pushes and motivates one to move ahead. He becomes conscious in a special manner of his own smallness in the large universe. This awareness defines an emotion mentioned in the first paragraph, which is the emotion. So the emotion of humility. Okay. What were the symbols of reverence that were left? Again, HPS Ahluwalia left the photo of Guru Nanak. Rawat left a photo of Goddess Durga. Edmund Hillary buried a cross beneath the rocks and the stones. And Fudorji left the relic of Lord Buddha. What, according to the writer, did his experience as an Everester teach him? So, what did his experience as an Everester taught him? So, this experience as an Everester taught him to overcome the summit within his mind first rather than taking a physical plunge. This experience taught him to be strong and to continue practicing harder and to strive ahead for the goal you want to achieve. Now, the second question says, write a sentence against each of the following statements, and your sentence should explain the statement which is given to you. The first one has been done. The experience changes you completely. What does it mean? That somebody who's climbed the Mount Everest is never the same again. Man takes delight in overcoming obstacles. What does it mean? That a man who has a man is always keen on facing challenges in life because the happiness that you derive in overcoming those obstacles is even greater and better and merrier. Mountains are nature at its best. So mountains, according to Major Ahluwalia, was the best thing that gave you a glimpse of the beautiful nature that God has bestowed. The going was difficult, but the after effects was satisfying. This simply means that the climb to the mountain was very difficult. It was very challenging, full of obstacles. But the result, the consequence, once he had reached on the top of the mountain, he felt exhilarated and thus his efforts were well paid off. The physical conquest of a mountain is really a spiritual experience. So he has again said that once you climb the mountain, it is not only physical pleasure that you derive, it is not only fame that you get at the end of it, but you get spiritual happiness. You are mentally satisfied and overwhelmed with the climb and the efforts that you take. Okay, so with this, my dear students, we come to the end of this chapter. The chapter has been very well explained to you. The back exercises have been discussed with you at length. I hope it is clear to you now. So I shall see you all now in my next lecture. Thank you.